Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to episode 5 of series 3 of my school leader interview series. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Hood, who's the principal of Oak National Academy. We're going to be talking about that, but more importantly, the entire focus of these interviews that I do is really to dig a little bit deeper and get to know the person behind the leadership role. Which I think in Matt's case, in terms of being the principal of Oak, is going to be really, really interesting. So Matt, welcome. Thanks very much for taking the time out to talk to me.
Thanks for having me.
First things first, do you want to introduce, I think it'd be good if you introduce yourself to start with, if that's okay.
Sure. So I'm Matt. I'm the principal at Oak National Academy. We're an online school that was set up by teachers at the start of the pandemic, and we provide free to access asynchronous lessons for 4 to 16-year-olds. It's about 10,000 of them in total. I'm also chair of governors at Bay Leadership Academy, which is a secondary modern in the wonderful northwest sunny seaside town of Morecambe. And I'm a trustee at the Brilliant Club, which is the UK's largest widening participation charity.
Wow. First thing I want to obviously we'll go into the usual questions in a few minutes, but I think it would be remiss to not kind of talk a little bit about obviously Oak. So do you want to just tell us where this idea came from? Who came up with it?
So there's a sort of number of different theories here of exactly where this came from. I place the blame at the door of David Thomas, who is a head teacher of Jane Austen College, a secondary school in Norwich. Whether it's quite there or not is going to be for the history books. But in short, at the start of that Easter holidays, a conversation started about the exam question. Effectively was, there are some people, teachers, who are in the fortunate position, often by sort of luck or happen chance, right? They're a bit interested in ed tech. They've got some great computer science teachers at their school. The school business manager or their IT technician is particularly hot on this. They didn't have large numbers of cases of teachers who were out, or they had fewer pupils from more vulnerable backgrounds, so that was absorbing less of their time. But they were just in the fortunate position of being able to provide sort of pretty good quality asynchronous lessons for their own pupils. And the exam question was, do you reckon we can find enough of these teachers to get about 180 lessons? That was the number, reasonably broad curriculum, 3 a day for primary schools, 4 a day for secondary schools. Like, can we get about 40 odd teachers together to try and do 180 lessons, a full week's worth of lessons for anybody that wants to use it? Rather than just doing it for their own kids, can we sort of broadcast this live? And we'd seen in those couple of weeks before the Easter holidays, when this was, totally novel for everybody, we'd seen some of these teachers doing this, and the effort was basically, can we corral them into a group? We had about 8 days to do that, build the platform, record the lessons. And then we just repeated that process, I think about 11 times over, increasing the number of subjects, adding content for pupils who attend specialist settings, making it more accessible. We did assemblies, we did some activity clubs, and the whole thing has essentially just spiraled from there. At the moment, we've got about 2.5 million kids a week taking part in lessons with us. So it's it's grown.
How do you track that?
Yeah, so the site basically collects anonymized user data. We make some assumptions about who is using that based on whether they came through our teacher hub, which is the kind of teacher-facing bit of our site, or whether they came through the classroom. And so we make some assumptions based on that. But yeah, they're the kind of rough numbers. It's the kind of analytics behind the site, basically.
Thinking particularly, I mean, obviously a lot of people watching will have used Oak lessons, right? But just particularly with regards to yourself, what does leading Oak National Academy involve on an average day?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my job has been from the start of this, and it comes to one of your questions later. This is like an interdisciplinary endeavor. We need to bring together sort of 4 broad categories of people. We need to bring together teachers and educationalists who can record the content. We need to bring together operations people. That's both operations people to run the show, equivalent in a school of you sort of school business manager person, but also operations people who manage our lesson production and improvement process. You know, we were created about 8,000 of those 10,000 lessons in about 3 weeks over some holidays. This is a big like operational process. The third group are engineers, developers, designers, variety of different roles there, but the people that build and maintain our platforms. And then the final group are communications experts. You know, we needed to tell a lot of people about this really, really quickly. And my job is to work with, encourage, create the conditions where those 4 teams of people can do their best work. And some days that is about working through ways in which those teams are working together. Some days it is about doing some things, communications wise. So I do lots of webinars with teachers, where they, do a lot of the interface with the DFE. Other days it's preparing board papers. We have our own governance structure. We're accountable to people, and ultimately that's on my plate. So it varies across all of those things.
Can we like rewind from you becoming principal of Oak National Academy? You can just briefly take me all the way back to like kid.
Yeah.
Can you go from like there to kid in a minute? Yeah. And just go through.
So, kid, born in Morecambe, that's home, and grew up all. I spent my childhood growing up there. I went to university in York. And a big part of that transition from my secondary school and right through university was working. I started working at quite a young age. First, like doing odd jobs, washing cars for people on my street, that sort of thing.
What age was that?
I reckon I was trying to blag neighbours to give me a £5 to wash their car when I have to check my mum, 10, maybe something like that. The second longest post I've ever held, including my trustee posts, was in a restaurant. I used to work at Brewster's, which is like the family pub. I did that for 6 years. I started there when I was, I think, 15, and did that right the way through university.
You were doing that presumably when you were going to school, and then you were doing that.
Evenings, weekends at school. Same at university. I love both earning my own money, like that was a really big deal for me, and I learned loads from working in a like pub restaurant. You just like everybody goes to Brewster's. You just mix with everybody, and
Brewster's in Morecambe.
It's based in Lancaster.
Interesting times.
So you just and the big like lesson from that bit of my career was just like never ask anybody to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself. Like that was the big thing. When I was about 17, I think I was a supervisor already there, because I already had 3 years under my belt, and the sort of tenure of people at those places isn't particularly long. I then left university, started teaching straight away. Was placed through Teach First in a school in North London. I then moved from there into the DFE. I was a civil servant for a few years. And then my career since leaving the DFE has all been like up until this point in sort of teacher training and teacher development. So right away from like brand new teachers right at the start of their career, all the way through to, school trust CEOs, NLEs, that sort of group. And I finished up my last job in November. My partner and I got married in 2019. Sorry, this is November a year ago, because obviously we've skipped a year. We went on honeymoon for a couple of months. I came back, did a few like bits of random things whilst I was figuring out what I was going to do next, and And then along came a global pandemic and a WhatsApp from a head teacher in a school in Norwich saying we should try and do this thing. So that's I suppose where I am to now. So it's sort of teaching, school leadering on the front line. I was an assistant principal at the school that I now chair as a governor. Charities, not-for-profits that train teachers, and policy wonkery, all inside or outside of the DFE.
So that's the past. The future for Oak now. Obviously, we're on this roadmap now. Next 6 months, it looks like by the summer things will change, and even in a few weeks. To be fair, it's all going to change. So, where do you see? Like, I know I've seen a lot of people saying, well, and I've used Oak quite a bit in the last couple of months. So, to me, there's still value in it, but where do you see it going?
Yeah, so we're pretty good at like spinning on a pinhead and changing things quite quick depending on the circumstances. Part of the sort of nature of our birth means that we're sort of relatively comfortable with that. When people say you've got 6 months to do something, that feels like a wildly leisurely amount of time for us. So we currently open until the 31st of August this year. Like that was the sort of arrangement that we made.
Yeah.
We're doing quite a lot of work talking to teachers at the moment about how they're using the resources and trying to understand that as much as possible, to see whether there's a case for kind of continuing to keep the organisation open. If we think there's a good case, then we'll figure out a structure and a funding model that makes that possible. We're seeing a few use cases that I think are really interesting. One big one, which is very obvious, is this sort of catch-up homework angle. You've got the lessons there. We're trying to aggregate our single lesson quizzes at the moment into unit level assessments to help teachers do that kind of diagnostic, like what do they know, don't know. You then obviously got the lessons you can point them to if they've got different gaps that need filling depending on what they've missed or what they've not missed. So we think we can be useful there. The one that I love the most, just because it was such a horrendous experience every time it happened, is using the resources to help improve the quality of cover. There's nothing worse than waking up at 6 a.m. with a banging headache and having to set 5 cover lessons for the day. And the guilt that you feel, because you feel awful, you don't really want to spend loads of time doing that. What you want to do is get yourself back to sleep and hopefully recover. Yet at the same time, Mr. Rogers is covering your lesson and you don't want to leave Mr. Rogers just totally out of his element, teaching a subject he doesn't know with, year 9 on a Friday. Right? It's just like not a nice thing to do.
No.
Whereas like just being able to say like, here's a lesson, here's the link, you can download and print off the resources, you can see the broad structure of the lesson. What you've got to do is like manage the room, make sure you're keeping the pupils on task. That's the bit that's transferable between our classrooms, right? And so that I think is really interesting. The last one I also quite like from my teacher training work is particularly for new and early career teachers, got lots of trainees who are using the lessons to observe. You obviously don't see the full spectrum of things that a teacher needs to do in their classroom, but you get to see lots of explanation and modeling. And, I think back to my own teacher training, and it was always useful to watch other teachers.
Yeah.
It's more useful, I think, to watch a teacher teach your content.
Yeah.
It's most useful watching a teacher teach the content you're going to teach next. And that's the bit that timetables in schools never allow you to do, right? Like we're all teaching exchange rates this week. And so it's very difficult for trainees and early career teachers to see someone else do it. So we think there's good use cases. We're really trying to validate that.
I'll be honest with you, for me, when I was training, it would have helped subject knowledge wise to terms of planning, because when you're 21 or whatever going in, it's hard, and you don't have the time quite often to do all that legwork.
And those teachers who teach subjects that don't quite fill a timetable, so I'm one of those, right? Like I would often get put into some maths, I would get put into some geography occasionally, like put in some PE occasionally. They're not the subjects that I'm most familiar with, and so it's interesting. So we're validating that at the moment. If that we think there's a strong enough case, we've got to figure out how to keep funding the operation. And one thing that's really important to me is that like we're not putting barriers or paywalls in front of the content that we've already created and made available for everybody. All of that career to date has been about closing inequality gaps between poor kids and wealthy peers. All of those jobs have focused my energy on that. whacking a paywall in front of the stuff so that wealthier pupils can afford to pay for it, or schools in wealthier places can afford to pay for it and others can't, isn't why we're here. So we've just got to figure that out, but we will. I think if we can do what we've done, we can figure that one out.
Final question on Oak before we move on to kind of my quickfire questions. If you were to go back in time now to last March or last February when you were starting this project, is there anything you'd change? Is there anything that you'd look at and go, you know what, I got that wrong, or you know what, I could have done that better, or that could have changed? What are the kind of, if you were to say, I don't know, 2 things, what might they be?
So one's going to sound a little bit bizarre, but the thing that I've had to learn most about, bizarrely, is copyright. We as teachers have quite a lot of freedom compared to just about everybody else in the economy to use copyright materials in our classroom. And I think most of the time we're actually breaking the law when we're doing it, but nobody comes after us. I just massively underestimated the complexity of this area of our work, and it has it causes all kinds of challenges. It's about 30% of our resources that you can't download. And you can't download them because we haven't got the copyright permissions right. I think we could have done more. We could have acted earlier to sort that part out. So that is the first one that I think I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't ask enough people to kick the things hard like I could have done. I knew people who would have given me better advice on that, I think. I think the second thing that I would have done is I would have tried to make the tent bigger quicker. I think our tent was quite small for that first term, and we came under a decent amount of fire for it being a niche group of people. And you know, part of that is unavoidable because we were just like people WhatsApping people, and people who know people, like, is the way you get things off the ground, but simultaneously it doesn't leave you with a particularly diverse group of people. And I'm really pleased that we resolved that the second time round when we went from about 40 teachers to about 350. There was a real opportunity to address that, and I think we did. But I think we could have done that. It would have just required a little bit more thought early on, rather than like, Tom will do history, great, good, right, get him in, go. Like we could have just thought a little bit more about it, I think.
Do you think in terms of subjects, do you feel as though you could have broadened it last year more, maybe design technology, drama?
Maybe earlier. And I just think though of the, I was topping like 100 hours a week for about 15 weeks, 16 weeks, something like that. As were like huge chunks of the team. And I totally get how I can imagine how it would feel that your subject wasn't included, and that was a slight, it wasn't at all. We were just moving as quickly as we could, trying to do all the things we could, and we missed out on some. Luckily, particularly those subject associations have been great. We've resolved that now. We're almost at full coverage. There's still a couple of subjects that we've got to go, but we've got a decent, I think we've got over 20 now if you include different subject areas in our specialist content. So
it's amazing. I mean, it's fantastic, and I think anyone who's used Oak is kind of indebted, including me. Saved my life a few times. So on to yourself. These are quick fire. So first thing you grab in the morning.
And coffee. I went through my teaching years not drinking it, and then I started drinking it to woo my husband, who loves drinking it. I didn't really like it, but I had to drink it, and now I'm like completely broken and addicted. It was. I suppose it was worth it, but yeah, it's bad now. It's really bad.
Happy days. Biggest inspiration in life.
So I'm a politics nut in my spare time. My inspirations are titans of social democracy: Hillary Clinton, Tony Blair, Angela Merkel, Bobby Kennedy, Barack Obama. I think Mayor Pete's going to join that gang. Macron, Jacinda, all of those people are my inspirations because I think they are sufficiently inspiring and motivating to the general population, but don't overpromise and underdeliver. And I think that's a really important balance to get right. So they're titans of social democracy. I would
be honest,
call them.
When I said I was a fan of Tony Blair, I got a lot of unfollows.
We got a signed note from him as a wedding gift, which was like our best. Somebody managed to get somebody to do it, and Josh's best man presented it to us on our wedding day. So if that gets me some unfollows, so be it.
What do people notice about you?
I think they notice how not very tall I am often, which isn't something I necessarily want them to notice. I think they notice my enthusiasm for my work. I get a lot of "you're very enthusiastic" type comments, and I don't mind that.
What do you hope people notice about you?
I'm not that short, really. I think 5'8" is perfectly acceptable. I hope they notice how tall I am.
Biggest weakness or fatal flaw?
I like to do well, and I like others to notice, and I'm sort of competitive like that. And I've got to keep it in check, otherwise it can be a little bit on the ugly side. I'm not a great I love board games. I'm not a great board game opponent. It's another thing to blame the grammar school system for, if you ask me. I think it turned me into a competitive monster.
Biggest strength?
I think I mentioned this earlier. I think I'm good at building really great teams.
One personality trait you don't have time for?
This is a toss-up, I think. I find it very, very difficult to manage my behavior around people who cannot disagree without being disagreeable. People who bring no goodwill to a conversation, I find very, very frustrating. The other one, it's
experience. I'm sure you've experienced a lot of that in the last year.
A little, yeah. The other one is, I don't know if you know this phrase, but I find people, we call them 11-a-reefs in my friendship group. So you say, I went on holiday to Tenerife, and they say, oh, well, I went on holiday to 11-a-reef. Like, I find that a little grating on occasions as well. We call them 11-a-reefs. So yeah, watch out for those people.
Nice. Comfortable silences or non-stop conversation?
Oh, reject the premise of the question, I think, on this one. I like a bit of both. There are times when I really do just like
but you got to choose one.
Non-stop conversation, I think, is the preference if I have to choose.
Being nice or being fair?
Being fair. Easy one.
Okay. Worst day as principal of Oak National Academy?
Worst day as principal of Oak National Academy? God, that's a really good question. I think some of the worst, like they sort of dot around, but you know, the thing that's really hard in the position that we're in is like we get stuff wrong because we're doing things at pace and we're humans. And on occasions, the things that we've got wrong have like resulted in blowback on individual teachers. And anybody who has a team of people is responsible for their team. There was like one occasion where somebody really went after one individual teacher early on, and there are bits of Morecambe in me that want to respond in particular ways to that, and it's just not appropriate for me to respond in those ways, and continuing to be sort of cool and calm and professional is sometimes.
I'll do it for you if you want.
yeah. I got some outriders
in the word way.
Yeah, but I find those days pretty tough. Because I've got to look after my team, right?
I've seen, in the last year recently, I've seen, I saw a few people having a pop at the teachers, and I just thought,
I am fair game. Teachers, I think we just need to be really mindful that they have exposed themselves. Some of these lessons.
What was being picked up on, like, I don't know, it was things like a spelling mistake on a slide, or a different way of teaching a particular topic, or things that, I mean, some of the public criticism, I completely disagree with that, targeting kind of individual teachers. But anyway, we move on. Best day as principal of Oak National Academy?
Best day, actually, relatively recently, we 0 rated the whole site. Like, that for me is it's just like an enormous thing. And it was reasonably scrappy to get there as well. We had some battles on our hands to get that one over the line. But 1 million kids are accessing through a mobile device. 1 in 20 families are saying they're struggling to pay for the cost of data, and cutting back on things like food and clothing to do that. And there is, credit to the telecoms companies. Like, they did have a system out there where you could request SIM cards and data and pass all those things around. But I just didn't believe that was sufficient. I think it placed an administration burden on schools on top of all the things they're doing. I think no offer that requires take-up results in universal coverage, because no communications plan ever gets to every family. And I think one of the things that gets forgotten often when dealing with these sorts of, like, how do we get this to everybody, is the dignity of the families involved. I don't think that parents should have to go and ask for a handout to get data to educate their kids. Like, I think that's undignified. I think we have a belief in this country that education should be free and accessible to everybody, and that needs to apply as much now as it does when everybody's in the building. I get to do odd bits of international work, and access to education is like a huge conversation in education globally, right? Like, we want all pupils to access. I mean, just primary education is a huge thing, particularly for girls. And we have become unused to conversations about access here in a way that is very normal in other parts of the world. And we have to continue that conversation about access, because catch-up is going to rely as much on a device and data as anything else is. So, I grew up in a family where we had a meter, and you pay more for your gas and your electricity on the meter than you do if you're on a direct debit. Like, it's just not okay to add education to that list of things that poor families pay more for and rich families get cheaper. Like, super proud of that. And, again, gargantuan effort from my team to get that over the line. The development work required to re-engineer the site so it was possible, and then the communications work to bring all of those people to that juncture is amazing.
Impressive. I mean, this is an interesting question, I guess, because I'm not sure how it would apply to your work now with Oak. But let's say, for example, whether it would be interesting to hear from the perspective of Oak National Academy, but also your wider thoughts in terms of teachers, when you're hiring them or when you're looking to employ them on Oak, what are the kind of perfect characteristics of your perfect candidate, your perfect team?
We could do an entire other podcast on this. So all of my work before Oak was focused on trying to understand and develop expertise in teachers. And I've done a TES leadership podcast, which you can get on any of the platforms, where I talk about what I mean by that. And I think that we will make better hiring decisions as a profession if we try to understand what the literature is telling us about the nature of expertise and seek that out in the teachers that we're trying to hire. Expertise is about effectively and efficiently solving the persistent problems of the role within a particular domain. So this is a domain-specific endeavor. Expert teachers have tons of explicit knowledge about their subject and how to teach their subject. But they also have huge amounts of contextual knowledge about the individual pupils that they teach. I think one of the things that we sometimes do when we try to hire teachers is we put them in with like a random class at our school in the hope that we're going to be able to see something, except their expertise is deeply interwoven with the pupils that they're teaching in that moment. And so I worry about that. I definitely don't look for any attempt to kind of codify personality traits. Doing an MBTI test is not going to tell you anything about this person. It's a voodoo astrology palm reading exercise, and you may as well do one of those. You may as well find out if they're a Sagittarius or not as to get their MBTI data. First thing I'm looking for, is their expertise. Second thing I'm looking for is a fit with some of the things that I believe are important in an organization, and I look for that in anybody that I hire. I care lots about giving people the freedom to make decisions within the domain that they're responsible for, and I try to remove any red tape or barriers that disempower people from making decisions. I also expect a huge amount of people when it comes to their responsibility to their colleagues and the organization for the decisions they take. That's the quid pro quo. So you can make whatever decisions you want, but you better damn well be responsible for it and think about the team around you and what they can bring to that call that you're about to make. And then I also want to know that they want to keep getting better. I want to know that they think it's important to continue to improve whatever it is that they're doing. I think if you've got freedom, responsibility, and continuous improvement in an organization, and that person can fit in, and they're an expert in the domain that you're trying to hire them, any test should be to try to test that expertise. That I suppose, the two parts to the hiring process. I also like to try and blind screen and do all of the various things I can to try and remove any biases from the start of the process until you've actually met the person. And I think those things are worth it, and we've all got a responsibility to do them.
Good answer. Where do you think new leaders go wrong?
I think we all think that our expertise transfers across domains more easily than it turns out to. If, again, back to my definition, expertise is about solving the persistent problems of your role. When you move into a different role, often vertically, right, you get a promotion, the role that you move into has a different set of persistent problems. And by definition, what you know and what you're able to do is less well suited to that set of persistent problems than the set of persistent problems that you used to have. And this is most problematic when the domain that you move to is reasonably close to the one that you just left, when the persistent problems feel quite similar, but they don't often are. I think in those situations, me included, can all be a bit defensive about needing to go back to school and learn some new stuff. We think that, I've been a deputy head, I know how to be a head, like I've done all of this stuff, and like lots of that is going to come with you, but some of it isn't, and you're going to need to learn new stuff to fill the gap. And the best way to learn new stuff is to have someone teach it to you, right? That's a really difficult thing sometimes, I think, for adults to admit. And it's obvious, right? Like if you wanted to learn to play the violin and you didn't know how to play the violin and I gave you a violin, you'd ask for some lessons. That feels very different. And so it's sort of quite comfortable, but it's when it's close to what you do, I think we struggle just as humans, me as much as everybody else, to be like, hang on a minute, I'm actually doing something different now. I should probably learn about it. You know, and Oak is a great example. Like, I don't know anything about technology, ed tech. I was like the ed tech skeptic before all of this. I mean, I still am a bit of an ed tech skeptic, right? Like, I go on panels and I'm like, you know, iPads aren't going to change the world. Why are you wasting your money? I was definitely wrong about some of that stuff. There's bits that I still hold on to, but like, I've had to learn about a whole load of stuff, and it's really taken me to wrench myself out sometimes to be like, do you know what? I'm going to read this book about this thing that I don't know anything about, because I've now got to have a conversation with our developers where they're going to say words and I don't know what they mean.
Yeah. Got you. Listen, Matt, we're out of time. So thanks ever so much for taking the time out to do this interview. It was absolutely fantastic to speak to you. And I'm sure everybody watching this will share in saying with me, thanks very much for everything you've done over the last year for everybody in schools, teachers.
Well, look, this is your colleagues helping you. As I said, all I did was bring this random group of people together and point them in the direction. So it's a great example of what the teaching profession can do when it works together. Like, really, really proud to be part of it. And thanks for having me on this evening. Really, really grateful.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care.